excited to have Renée Walker here. And Renée, I felt so deeply aligned to you the moment that I met you. You are such a force in the wellness space, and the work that you are doing to integrate the mindset and the spirituality is just it's what our listeners need. We work with highly ambitious and high achieving female entrepreneurs and leaders, and really, they're just hungry for the type of work that you do. So you're the creator of Renee Walker Wellness. And I'm curious, what brought you to that moment for yourself of creating this business and feeling inspired to put this work out in the world?
Mm, thank you. Well, first of all, I'm just so happy to be here with you. And it sort of speaks to the power of showing up in person to events because you and I met in person at an event and just had that immediate connection. So it just warms my heart to now sort of extend that here in this space. I would say, like anything, it's been an evolution. But for me, it really started over about like 20 years ago. I was asked to be part of a life coaching group to like participate in a coaching group with other moms. My kids were like very little at the time, and I did not know anything about it. I thought, I don't know what this is, but if I can get a sitter and leave the house, the answer is yes.
Mm.
And so I signed up, I joined. I didn't really know the women, but the coach that I had, I remember that question of like, what do you want?
Mm.
And being asked the most simple, basic question, what do you want? And I was floored. I was sitting there in a like happy, mom, like a great relationship, 2 kids, like everything was looking good on the outside, but that particular question just hit me in the sense of like no one's ever asked me that question. And it just sort of started the path of like how most of my life was really sort of doing what was expected of me and what was the right thing to do and what, would make the people around me happy, and never really quite pausing enough to ask myself that question. And I mean, partly I'm from a generation where we just didn't ask those questions really. So that sort of was the moment where I feel like I cracked open a bit there, and then it just started that lifelong process of uncovering, and then a few years in after that, just felt like, I need to share that with other women, like, this message needs to be spread, and we need to open up the conversations where we can just be real, and we can be ourselves, and we can take off the social masks and show up from that vulnerable place. So that's a long question, but that was the beginning of the journey that eventually, through many sort of different things that happened, led to Renee Walker Wellness, which officially launched right, yeah, 5 years ago when COVID started. Really, that was the beginning.
Well, perfect timing, really,
Mm,
because I think it actually did pause everyone to start asking some pretty deep questions. So it's amazing
yeah.
how one question can just
Mm,
sit inside of you. And, I think for me, I come from a corporate background and always thinking you're trying to find that like big idea or that big thing. And it's not. Like, what a simple question that then led you on the path and trajectory that you were meant to keep following those breadcrumbs. So then you went into meditation, NLP, Reiki. What what led you to those being the path
mhm.
to opening things up?
Yeah, so when I first started, it was more sort of the coaching piece, the personal development piece that I was really attracted to and just was voraciously, learning everything that I could about it. And back in the day, had a company which was called Mothers on Fire. We published a book, produced events. So that was like probably, 12, 13 years ago. And then life happened. I did that business with a few other partners, and we sort of just paused or stopped doing it eventually. And I remember that, I mean, for me personally, I had a health crisis,
Mhm,
a scare that once again sort of forced me to pause and to reevaluate
mhm,
my priorities and how I was spending my days. I mean, there's nothing like something happening on a health level to make you sort of question and wonder.
mhm,
And in that pause, I started to really get into yoga in like a deep way. And I loved it. And I was fascinated by the philosophy of it.
mhm.
And so I wanted to learn more about the philosophy of yoga. And I realized there was like no courses or classes other than a teacher training.
Mm,
So at the time, like both my kids did, one was rep hockey, the other one was like figure skating at the national level. So like we were just all over the place, driving kids everywhere. And I remember thinking, oh, that would be so cool to do, but it's not going to happen now, like someday. And then when I looked into it more, it was the one night a week that I could do. It was like everything was just lining up. And I thought, okay, here I am. I'm gonna sign up for it, never with the intention of teaching it, just with the intention of learning, so for myself. But, like, things that's how the universe works, right? It brings you those situations, and in the process of teaching it, I really sort of found my voice and really realized that yeah, this is something that I feel like can really add value to other people. People were asking me, "Can you keep teaching?" And so that was sort of the beginning, and this was about, 9 years ago where I, uh, opened up more the spiritual side, and that led into meditation, and that led to, healing, the healing such as Reiki that I was doing for myself, for my own anxiety, and it was very helpful for me, so I decided to learn more about that. So everything sort of came together, and, just prior to the pandemic, the interesting thing was that my website was ready, everything had lined up that I was ready to go, and, COVID happened, which was, I know, obviously a devastating situation for so many people, but for me, it actually just aligned right at the right time where it was like, oh, space opened up, and I was ready for it because the pre-work had been done, so it was just a matter of now having the confidence or, to put myself out there in an online space, which I had done in a previous business and said, "I'm never doing that again because it takes up so much energy."
yeah.
And of course, right? But that was like the at that time, it was so great because we were all sort of like forced to go online in a very
Mhm,
imperfect way.
mhm.
Like, just I mean,
So true.
I was teaching, like, 8 classes a week, and it was, like, from my basement, from where I didn't have proper like, it was
It
just
didn't matter. People were just
didn't
hungry
matter,
for
no one
support.
cared, people just wanted to be connected,
Yes.
which for me worked out so well because in the past, it was like the perfectionist part of me was always like, "Oh, no, it needs to be perfect, it needs to be in a studio," and all of those things were always playing out, and then that sort of gave us all permission to show up and
And
see
be
where it
and
led.
support and exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
as you're sharing your stories, I just feel that intuition, like you've just continued to hear the nudges, have your experiences, which so often are put in front of us because as we heal, we're learning how we can support other people in that. And I
Mhm.
for me, yoga was the beginning of the journey too, so that's really interesting.
Mm,
For myself, as you said, meditation for myself. And as you
mhm,
heal those inner parts of yourself, you start to realize that, maybe you're just a little further down the way that you can put a hand backwards and say, "Come along, come along, let me support you in these ways." So, I love just I have this deep sense of you following that intuition, and it's a big part of what I hear you speak about. So, where do people get stuck with this? Because I do think we hear the word a lot. We're told to follow our intuition, and then it's like, "What is that?" Where is that little
Mm.
voice? So maybe walk us through what that looks like and how you've experienced that.
Yeah, I feel that when it comes to intuition, it really, when we speak of the modalities that we talked about, right? Meditation and yoga, and why so many of us find ourselves in those spaces is that it's like those moments where we can turn off all of the stuff, all of the noise that's going on in our life, which is very loud, as we know, turn down sort of all of the roles, responsibilities, like all of those external expectations and also the expectations that we place on ourselves. And those are the moments where we can just be and turn up the volume on ourselves. And so intuition is really the voice of your higher self. And in order to be able to hear, it's always there. It's always speaking to us. It's always guiding us. But most of the time, the other noise is louder than our intuition. And that's the part that requires time, patience, and it requires showing up for yourself and figuring out no one's intuition speaks to them in the same way. For many, though, it is a full body sensation. So, we tend to think that it's like a voice or something. And yeah, like you can sometimes hear something that is calling you, but oftentimes it's that moment where you see something and you just have that full body experience of, yeah, this feels right, or maybe this is the opposite. This doesn't feel right. So learning to pay attention to what that looks like in your own body because it is different for everyone.
It's so true. I remember for
Mhm.
the longest time I was judging myself because I would hear people say, they were meditating and they'd have a vision. And then they could
Mhm.
follow that vision, or they'd see something so clearly, or they'd hear something so clearly. And it's taken me a while to understand mine is experienced through a felt sense. So I have the sense
Mhm.
of something, I'll sort of get those body tingles, and then
Yeah.
know that there's a message inside with my higher self to really tap into. And it's so
Mm.
interesting, like, now looking back, how much judgment just got in the way of that, because I had this
Yeah.
perceived notion of how it should show up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what happens too is that so if we speak of we'll just get into the spiritual stuff, if you're okay with that.
Let's go, Renee.
Let's go there. So intuition being the voice of your higher self being the aspect of you that is connected with source, with spirit, universe, whatever you use to describe that higher power. And so that feels so it's less about creating that connection and it's more about sort of removing what's in the way of it, right? Because it's always present. It's just, again, giving ourselves the time and the space to actually begin to feel and to experience it. But the other side to that, which is more sort of the subconscious mind, the ego, the nervous system, their role is to keep you safe.
Mhm.
And safe means knowing what's happening. So, what happens too sometimes is we start to second guess ourselves because we're feeling this connection intuitively maybe, but then the mind, the ego is like, well, that doesn't make sense. And then there's always like that questioning and the second the doubting ourselves, right? That comes into play. And that's where often we just live, right? We stay in that place and it's just like, of course, that doesn't make sense. We're always trying to intellectualize things to make sense of it because that's how the mind feels safe and what it needs is that certainty and the intuition is there's no certainty to it, right? That's the faith part to it. That's trusting that I can't really explain it, but for some reason I really feel guided to call this person, sign up for this course, whatever it may be. But it doesn't always make sense. And we've sort of like this, our culture, society is wired in a way where we need to make logical sense of everything. So if we don't have that proof or we don't have the, the intellectual reason to do it, then, usually the other takes over. So it takes a lot of time, and it's never perfect too. I think we need to give ourselves that grace that, yeah, I mean, we're all gonna make mistakes. Sometimes we follow and we listen to it, sometimes we don't. And sometimes we do listen to it and it doesn't really work out. And this is where sometimes we can question ourselves. But most of the time, the detour that it led us to is actually what we needed.
Mhm.
So there's part of listening to our intuition is also being detached from the outcome of what it is. So when we say, from a spiritual perspective, that you're trusting that everything is unfolding for your highest and best, we don't necessarily always know intellectually what that highest and best is. So we may think that this is the thing for us. And so we say, we go for it, but maybe, we need a little detour somewhere else. So that is also sort of that surrendering piece to intuition that is often the hardest, but so incredibly important.
Yeah. I think that surrender piece has been, the greatest growth opportunity for me,
Mm.
reading The Surrender Experiment. Have you read The Surrender
Oh,
Experiment?
love Michael Singer. Yes.
Just being in like, just sitting in that surrender, trust, lean in, allow, be an allowance, understand that even when there's suffering, it's because it's going to present the opposite side of joy to you, that you can only see the light when you experience the darkness. So that and, having my husband read it was just a really,
Oh.
like, life-changing, I would say, experience for us, and we both grew up Christian, and we both grew
Mhm.
up with experiences inside of what was taught to us to be under the umbrella of spirituality, and kind of having to, yeah, unbecome some of those perspectives as well, because spirituality and religion don't actually always align as well, right? So I think we have misperceptions around that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, and it can be very strong depending on what your relationship is with your specific religion, and to me, it again requires that getting to know yourself and really leaning into what feels right for you, because for most of us, I mean, I grew up Catholic, and I mean, I was born that way, or born Catholic, I should say. And, in an environment where I never questioned it, never asked it, it was what it was,
Mhm,
which is the case for most people, right? You sort of grow up in a way in which you're taught. And, so the exercise of really taking a step back and being like, do what resonates as truth for me?
mm,
And I always say, it's like, this is what resonates for truth as truth for me now. Because that might change, it might change.
mhm,
The whole idea with it is to stay open. We never know. We don't know. Anyone who tells you they know, to me, is like, "Ooh, they're the people that I'm more worried about." So, sort of staying open, and then there's an opportunity to, if you find spirituality in your religion, then that's beautiful and that's amazing. Or maybe you find your spirituality more outside of a religion, but the religion, like for me, my religion, I have, a connection to, if I think of the Catholic, church, because my grandmother, who's was one of my favorite people in the world, was one of the most devout Catholics. So when I think of church, I think of her,
mhm,
and that's my connection to it now. It may not be what I connect to in terms of my spirituality. Now it's different, but you can still have, um, I think the beauty of it is when you get to choose what it is for you,
mhm. Agreed.
and
And
recognizing that the 2 are different.
yeah, and also the connection to understanding there's something bigger at play.
Yeah,
And no matter
ultimately.
what, there's that openness to that, right? So, one of your favorite mantras is energy flows where intention goes. And,
Mm.
again, the, Power of Intention by Wayne Dyer was one of my gateway drug books to this whole world. So, help our listeners understand, what do you mean by that, and how do we get there?
Mm, mhm. Yeah, so when it comes to energy, and energy is a frequency, right? It's everywhere. It exists in everything. It's like where we bring our energy to, we give it more energy. We give it more power. And the thing is, we tend to maybe think, or there would be a number of people that maybe feel like, well, no, like whatever happens to me, and we don't have any control over that. And I always say, yes, like we can't control external circumstances. We can only control how we choose to show up
Mm.
to life. And so when it comes to our intention, we get to choose what we bring our energy to. And the more that we focus our energy into a certain area, the more life that we bring to that area. You know, our mind has this negativity bias. So our mind is actually wired to go to all of the negativity. And so that is just how we're wired. When we start to understand that, then you realize, oh, okay. So it's actual, when we talk about the work is being like, maybe, yes, my mind is naturally going to the negativity, but I get to choose where I direct the energy. And so maybe there's 10 things in my life happening right now. 8 of them are going well, but my brain is just focused on those 2 things that aren't going well, which now, in my experience, the way in which I'm viewing the world is more negative because 'cause I'm focusing my lens is just focused on those 2 things. So, in making it an intentional decision to be like, "No, I'm actually gonna open up. How about I focus on those 8 things right now that are going well?" Then we're giving more power to that experience, to that more positivity. And then like attracts like. So
Mm.
the more you focus on the things that are working well, the more that you're bringing that into your life. It doesn't mean again that, you know, life is life. Life is going to happen, and sometimes things happen that do not feel great, but the way in which we respond to it is our choice. We get to respond and to choose where we're going to focus our energy.
Absolutely. I was sharing with someone recently. So you co-created a beautiful event called Manifest Her, and that's
Mm,
where I had the incredible opportunity to not just meet you, but experience you, and just be in a room where exactly what you just described was the energy and experience of the
mm,
event. And I'm often saying to people, it's not what you say. They won't remember what you said. They will remember how you made them feel, how that
mm,
experience touched their heart and their soul. And so
mm,
that was how Manifest Her unfolded. So I'm driving down the road, and I said yes to the event because I followed the nudge. And one of my desires this year is to go to more women's events where beautiful women are showing up and collaborating and co-creating and just sharing all of the energy that we just spoke about. And so I didn't know. I didn't know you. I didn't know Binyu. And so I said yes. And okay, I'm meant to be there. And I'm driving down the highway and I'm saying to myself, what am I doing? I'm not going with anyone I know. I don't know anyone who is going to be there. I know someone that I've been connected to through someone else, but I've never met them. And so as I'm driving there, I can feel my anxiety starting to rise. And just taking a couple of deep breaths, you followed the nudge, you're meant to be there. Just go with no expectations, just
mm,
openness, open heart. The answers will provide themselves when you walk in there. It just be an allowance of that. And as I'm saying that, I'm not saying that that was an easy choice necessarily. I had to really work with myself through some deep breathing while I'm driving, had to keep my eyes open. And I put on some music that would support me through that. And finally, after probably 15 minutes, I just remember smiling and thinking, wow, this is so interesting that you even spent the 15 minutes in that. Because when I chose it, it felt so right. Felt
Mhm.
so right. And so as I walked up to the beautiful location that you hosted, everything changed. I mean, the water was right there, so I just went over and I breathed in the water and I took a beautiful photo and walked in the building and intentionally with that heart open, I feel like everyone I met had their heart open.
Mhm.
It was incredible.
Yeah, it was a pretty special day, that's for sure, just the energy. But I love that you share that, Lori, because I feel like that's the part too that when we speak of following our intuition and our nudge, sometimes the misconception is that it's all, rose colored and it's all perfect. And that is such a great example of the intuition feels right. It's like, okay, this feels right. Maybe there's excitement. You say yes. And then fear shows up. And when the fear shows up is when we start to second guess and we're not sure. And I mean, I've had so many different ways that that's happened. And I know when I launched my podcast in September, and something that I shared on the podcast was like, it felt good intuitively. I'm like, okay, I know this is what I'm meant to do. But then the fear started to show up because I was calling it spiritually wired. Part of my fears was like, oh, people are gonna felt like before I could speak about spirituality a little bit more in a closed group, people that
Mm,
I knew, trusted, that I felt more exposed on the podcast because, oh, people are gonna think, oh, she does Reiki. Like, who, wow, that's weird. All of those sort of fears that I had were showing up. And then that's when you start to question, okay, is maybe it wasn't for me. Maybe my intuition was guiding me in the wrong way. But the fear part, anytime we're going to step out of our comfort zone, anytime we're doing something that helps us towards expansion, and really our soul's purpose here is to expand, it's to grow, it's to learn, it's to, really sort of expand in our way. So anytime that we are going to expand or grow or learn or whatever it may be, it feels uncomfortable, fear shows up, all of those things. So there's also very much in terms of, the listening to your intuition is one part, but the following through, the taking the inspired action can be very difficult. Usually it sort of wraps up and then you're like, just you had that beautiful day. And I know for me, as well, most of the time it works out, but there is that discomfort.
mhm.
So that, when you're being called intuitively to do something, it doesn't mean that it's always going to be easy. It can sometimes, and most of the time, it's hard.
Yeah, I think it's actually one of the most important things for people to know is
Yeah,
fear will always show up when we're growing. Fear will
always.
always show up when we're expanding. And so, in that moment, on that day, it's sort of, hello, fear. All right, I'm going to put you in the seatbelt beside me. You don't get to take the driver's seat on this one, but you can come along for the ride and we'll
Mhm.
work through it together, and, I think it's fascinating even just you and I both sharing those stories about your podcast and that experience for me, because this is the work we do to support people, and so we're always growing in this way. We're always experiencing that next level of resistance that's gonna come along to just help us to grow. It's beautiful.
Absolutely. And when we can have these conversations, that's why I think that these conversations are so important, right? The conversations that you're bringing to your podcast, because we have an opportunity to normalize it in a way where, because on the outside, you and I may look like, oh, confident, they know, they wouldn't think. And I mean, even having met you, ha no, I mean, you're so, just a beautiful energy that you were so there that day in a way that moved me, and for you to open up and share that, yeah, like, then you realize we all have those parts of ourselves that maybe feel, that we have to work with.
Mm,
And it's not about fighting it, it's more just about accepting it, and the more we open the conversation, the more we realize, "Okay, I'm not alone in that." We're
yeah.
all facing fears. The people that we see that seem to have it all and are so confident, and I know I have people that I look up to and I think, "Oh, I know now." But yeah, they're also going through their
Yes.
own challenges and their own things in life.
Mhm. Oh,
Mhm.
absolutely. You know, one of the things that comes up as a theme often is this whole do more philosophy, the do more, get more. And, I think women, all women, and especially high achieving women, are ready for more, but it's not that kind of more. It's not the get more. It's not the external more. It's this more fulfillment, more peace, more joy. They're so ready for it. And I think so unaware of how to take that first step, how to truly believe that through the spiritual lens, you can come to that and you can still have the achievement you've experienced as well. They can go hand in hand. So how have you I know you do this in a beautiful practice and collective that you work with. So tell us a little bit about that.
About the more piece?
Yeah.
Hmm,
About how you
I
take your in your group, I feel like that's a big part of what you support people with.
mhm. You touched on something, you said something that is key,
Mm,
which is there's you can say more, and there's a different tone to the more, and it's more of the external validation, more of the external output of what we're giving. And then there's the more that is more you, right? It's like turning up that volume on you, on being the fullest expression of who you are, and those 2 are so different, and part of it, I think, comes with age. I know I do know some young people that are very evolved and seem
yes.
to, be there, so I don't want to and I also know people who of a certain age doesn't necessarily mean that either.
Amen.
But there But there is something, with time as well that we get to a point for women where you're just sort of tired of it. You've
Mm,
had enough of the giving to everyone else and not giving back to yourself. I feel that for many women too, our bodies tell us. Comes a point where the body's like, enough is enough.
mhm,
And this is where we can often have our bigger realizations of like, it's time now to give back to myself.
mm,
I also know that that is very difficult. It can be very difficult. As much as it sounds great, for a lot of women, they don't know where to start. And we don't know where to start because it's not meant it's so nuanced. It's not meant to be this check the box, and we are so used to, like, checking the box, and I'm doing this, and we're so used to giving energy.
mhm,
From an energy healing perspective, your heart chakra, when it's balanced, it's receiving just as
mhm,
much as it's giving. So a lot of it is just the softening piece of allowing and being okay with who you are and being okay with where you are. So really getting to know yourself again in a compassionate way. One of my favorite definitions of self-compassion is just being your own friend.
mm,
How can I be my friend in this moment? And so when you start to tune inward and you really start to connect, then you realize that that more comes from a place of just more connection within, more connection from a spiritual perspective, more connection with others, right? It's not about again, now for most of us, it's not about having more friends. It's the level, the depth of the connection with those that we have that matter more. So the lens or the way in which we look at it changes.
mm.
So more of you, I would say. is what we're
So
looking for out of
powerful.
ourselves.
I was recently speaking to this amazing woman, and we were talking about receiving and pleasure. We were talking about them like at the same time within the same context of how women receive pleasure, how we receive in general. And so she said to me, "Do you do you know how to have fun?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, like, that fun is not a problem for me. I'm like the fun queen. My my family and friends are like, "Lori will create the experience. We're good, no problem." And I love doing that. And she said, "No, no, I mean, like, fun for you, just you."
Mm.
And it caught me off guard. I was like, "Hang on. Fun just like, fun for me, fun alone, fun with nobody else around that I'm taking care of?
Yeah.
Oh, I've gotta sit with that one." And what a beautiful again, those simple things that take us into reflection. And, ooh, I've got God bumps talking about it. I actually realized I did not know how to do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
So I
what
went and
yeah,
got a
like a
coloring book.
subtle shift.
Like, it's a subtle
Oh, did
I went and got a coloring book, and then, when I was in Florida, as, Renee's in Florida right now, so I was saying I was there last week. I went to the beach and I built a sandcastle, and I cranked Pink Pony Club, and just
Mhm.
had a beautiful, expansive experience with, someone that I do this work with, and so really tapping into that, and it has pushed the edges.
I love that, and that is such a great like, what a subtle shift. It's like, "Oh, yeah, I have fun," but then you realize, "Well, no, I'm good at creating fun experiences for people around me because that's easy. I'm making
Mhm.
sure that everyone's having fun." You're giving you of yourself in those moments of creating fun, but to do it just for you is yeah. I had a similar thing that when I was on my yoga path and then I started teaching, and especially during the pandemic, I was teaching so many classes. And then I realized that it got to a point like where when I teach, because of the way it was done online, like I was always doing the class with people
Mhm.
as I was teaching it, and I was receiving from the practice. It was beautiful. But then I had a moment where I actually went to a yoga class, and this is what happens when you do work, right? You start to now it becomes something that it's about giving to other people. So someone would say, "Do you practice yoga?" "Yeah, I do a lot of yoga." And then I go to a class where I got to just be there and to receive it, and I was an emotional wreck because it was very different,
Mhm,
very different.
mhm.
I'm like, "Okay, it's been years now that the practice is about giving to everyone else," even though it felt like I was receiving something because 'cause I'm also doing the class and it
Mm.
still felt good. Just like for you, you're creating these moments for people, you're still having fun
Absolutely.
in the process,
Yes.
but it's just really interesting to then be like, "Oh, wait a second," to fully receive the experience, that's different.
Mhm. And it cracks something
Mhm.
open with everything, like, just that recognition. Now it's like receiving meditation in a deeper level and receiving
Yeah.
downloads in a di it's that at that point then when we learn that receiving, the heart chakra is cracking open in ways that I had never imagined and didn't actually realize needed to happen. Yeah,
Mm,
it's been
beautiful.
wonderful. So,
Yeah.
part of that I think reminds me of the importance of community. And so you've created this beautiful community, Spiritually Wired. I would love for you to share about the community, but also share what you have noticed of being important in that sense of community for people's expansion.
Mhm. So the spiritually wired community, I mean, it's been an evolution, but where I see that the biggest support and impact is that for women, we are always, just aligned with our conversation now, we're always giving to other people. And then even our own health, our own wellness, our own all of those things, it becomes like more to do on our list, which seems like it's this endless thing that we're trying to like have the perfect morning ritual, have the perfect, eat a certain way and do all of the things in a certain way. So where the intention behind spiritually wired as a community is to sort of offer that space where people can go and feel like they are being held, they're receiving, they get to come, learn, grow, expand with other people because there is something so powerful when you can do it energetically in a group. Now, some of the people that are part of the community will use it more for the resources. So they're sort of listening to it when they can, because I try to make it so that it's as accessible for everyone. But when you can be in community with other people who have the same intention, it just elevates everything, and it also reminds you why it's so important and why you are worth, right? The piece around self-worth is so big as well when it comes to women and doing this, but doing it in a way that doesn't feel heavy, that doesn't feel like it's another checklist, that feels like it's something that you are giving yourself and the curious so I do tend to attract women who are seekers, who are
Mm,
curious, who are wanting to learn, curious about certain things, and that to me is a part as well of keeping yourself open
mm.
because we want to stay open and curious and to learn sort of different perspectives, and I've learned so much from other women who I've been so blessed to surround myself with. So whether it's, friends that I have or other coaches, other teachers, or the people in my community who will share their experiences, ask questions, or, that is just so incredible when it comes to learning. So there's definitely a framework where, part of what I found to be very valuable is the way in which I start my days, the way in which I start my weeks. So I have like a morning morning practice that I do, which involves, meditation and scripting and stuff. So I offer the place where it's like, all right, 6:45 a.m. on Mondays, let's start the week together.
Mhm.
So that it's there for people to use as, whether you use the word accountability or that you're starting your week in community. And then we have some other classes throughout the week and the month, but that's the intention behind it to really sort of hold hands and do this work together so we can feel supported.
There's something so powerful in the sacred sisterhood that feels safe, where you can kinda get through that messy middle, and you can learn practices and be supported and feel loved and nurtured. It's so powerful, and it's what I felt when I came to Manifest Her, that
Mhm.
the people in your collective really feel like it's a safe container, that you're just building expansion. And I'm really noticing that women are really like that seeker piece, women are hungry for that. So it's beautiful for you to follow your own intuition and create that space and opportunity for them to be together in that beautiful expansion.
Mhm.
Love that.
Thank you.
Okay. I know that we could go on and on and on. So, what's one powerful message that you haven't had the opportunity to yet share that you would like to leave our listeners with?
Hmm. I would say it's to, for every woman that is here listening to just give herself that time, the recognition, the opportunity to be just who you are and to know that that is more than enough and to trust, to lean in to what is just exciting you a bit. What's got you a little curious and fired up, and what's making you we're so, again, focusing on everyone else that it's like, maybe it's asking you that yourself that question of, "What do I want? What's lighting me up right now?"
Mm.
And have
Just
the
back to the
courage
beginning.
to follow that right back to the beginning. That was a good circling back.
It was. Oh.
I love it. Thank you, Lori. This has been so much fun.
Thank you so much for being here. Okay, we're going to release you back out to the beautiful warm sunshine of Florida and just so in awe of the work that you're doing and so grateful that you shared this time with us. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.